Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Is it not coming through? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order now, please. Can we begin with an approval of the agenda? That's getting really loud. Yes, we do have quorum.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
By one. It doesn't look like it, but we've had a few associations drop out, so our quorum number is actually lower than it used to be. See if I can fix that. So approval of the agenda, raised by Diane, seconded by Sophia. Any questions or comments on the agenda? May I see a show of hands for all in favor of approving it? Any nay votes on that? No. Good, thank you. Call for notices of motion or reports to the board. Are there any at this point? Okay, next up are the minutes. Can I have someone vote to approve the minutes? Dawn, sorry. I'm fighting a cold, so I'm limited thinking going on. I'm a little stuffy. Sorry, seconder, Amy, thank you. Any questions or comments or addenda to the meetings, minutes? No? Okay. All in favor? Show of hands. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. First up on the agenda is the update for the special education plan, which will be done by Mark. As you know, the special education plan review this year was done by a subcommittee. We met twice on that to go over all the necessary changes and updates and so on. So I'll hand it over to Mark to take us through that.
Thanks, Jason. So on that review committee was Amy and Diane and Jason, as well as Jane and I. Did I miss anybody? No. Yeah, of course, Laura. Thank you. So we had, really our changes were fairly minor. And so our intent is not to go through them all because there was sort of a number of things that were a word here, a word there, that kind of thing that we don't want to go through in detail here, which is why we sent it to you in advance with the ability to see all of those suggestions and edits. So all SEAC members have had a chance to see those where you saw this kind of thing when you're in suggesting mode. You can see the changes there. So once again, we're not going to go through everything. It's really opening it up to questions, suggestions, etc. And I'll remind SEAC again of our second year of this new process where this is a first draft that goes to trustees for to be received initially so that they're aware of any changes going into the budget process. And then the final approval comes back here again in May or June when we have any final edits that may have come through the spring, and that gets approved again at SEAC and then goes to the board with the budget in the end of June. So same process we had last year. This is just the second year of it. So really, it's opened up to questions. We, like I said, that's why we sent it to you a week ago in hopes that you'd bring questions if you had them.
RTS, request to speak. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I didn't seem to find anywhere where there was a process for parents to formally agree to going to self-contained. I know we've brought this up a couple times. Is there anything in there that would then, like, some of our families recently, we had a meeting and parents are struggling with that. Where, you know, at IPRC, they're being surprised about placement, and then they're not properly sort of, it's not explained to them that they do have the option of partial integration if they wanted to. And so some families have been concerned about that. So was there anywhere in the plan where parents would have a form where it's maybe somehow formalized that parents are signing off on, like they're aware of what they're signing off on?
I'm going to turn to Jane and ask. Yeah, there's no form for that. Jane, sorry, you're going to have to come up to the mic. The projector is not, the big projector is not working tonight. I think a replacement's coming tomorrow. This projector has reached its end of life, which we just found out yesterday. So we're using the table mount you can see here. So everything is sort of normal for us, except online they can't see what we're projecting here because it's not part of the system. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, life goes on. So go ahead, Jane.
No. There isn't currently a form for that. The expectation is that the discussion happens at the SRT where the referral is made, excuse me, to go to IPRC, and then the sharing of information that the docs that go home 2 weeks before the IPRC would indicate what the referral is. So if it was, you know, an LD class with partial integration or would be there.
I guess our concern was, especially in Milton, where I reside currently, there's a lot of families that are new immigrants and English is not their first language, so they are completely confused. And people from our association have sat in IPRCs with parents, and they've thought they've signed up for partial integration, and they're being told now, no, you're going into a fully contained classroom, and they're kind of deer in headlights, shocked, surprised. So our association was sort of really concerned about our families being aware, fully being aware of this is what you're signing up for. So, and I looked through the plan, I didn't find anything in there where formally, like, it'd be nice if you could sign off and say, yes, I want a fully self-contained classroom, or I'm signing up for partial integration, or, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess what I'm thinking about is that there are a number of pieces of information and decisions that parents are a part of. And so if we're going to go down the path of having them sign, I guess we have to think about what are they signing, like what are we including in that? Is it just that, or how many other things are we including in that? So,
but this being the biggest, like where's my child being placed? Like there's no formal form or anything that parents can sign and say, just so that both sides understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? I think in all fairness, parents, it's overwhelming as it is, and often they think that a child will be partially integrated, but then when they get there, that's not happening. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, for our families.
Right.
And it would really help just to clarify, make it clear.
So maybe if I could say two things. One is that the intent around the review of the SPED plan is that we make sure that it's aligned with our current practices, right? So if we had changed our practice around this, then we need to make sure that the SPED plan reflects that. So because this is a conversation about a change in practice, I think we should have it, but not as part of this item, if that makes sense. So, because I think we had this conversation before that if there are changes in practice we want to discuss, definitely let's do that here at SEAC, but understand that the SPED plan review is not the vehicle by which to do that, because this is strictly meant to, for each year we make sure, does this reflect our practice?
So just to clarify, like my understanding of good practice, and I'm assuming this is happening in schools where parents are being informed, like, hey guys, here are your options.
Yeah.
Full integration, partial integration.
Yeah.
As sort of informing parents. I'm assuming that's already happening in practice.
Right. So can I suggest, if you agree, can we talk about this more so during the question and answer period? So sorry, I have my agenda in front of me, but item.
Oh, you mean SEAC discussion 5.0?
Yeah. Can we talk about that there? Yeah. I just think that's the place for it to be. That makes sense?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I would think so, because I mean, you've identified something that's important, Sophia, that it's not in the plan, or it's not easily accessible to parents. So I think we can finish this or continue this discussion during the SEAC question period. And 3.4 on the agenda is coming up with new topics to address here at SEAC. So that would be a good place to put that for something to be done in the future, either as how does it work now? And is it close enough to what the parents are expecting? Or is this something that should be added to the procedure? So that's something we can put on the list for a future time.
Yeah, that's
certainly.
wonderful. Yeah, because I think at this point, like I keep going back to our families and saying, yeah, like I brought it up several times, and now families want an answer from me. Like, what is this happening? Is it not happening across the board? So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Jane, go ahead, please.
Could I just add that this could be an important part of discussion for the revision, the rewrite of the Working Together document, which is going to be a fulsome support guide for parents and families. That may be the place for it.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the list. Did anyone else have a question or a topic they wanted to raise to do with the plan? Excuse me, the edits to the plan?
So there were a few items that the review committee had asked me to follow up with staff, and unfortunately I wasn't able. I did the follow up, but I didn't get. If you recall, I said I would. Sorry. Sorry about that. I didn't get a chance to email you with those responses. So if I could, since we're here to now, if I could confirm that with you now, I'll just let you know what those were. So we had a question around record retention and what was in the plan around a different period of time for the records for our ABA files. I clarified with Lori Wallace, our manager of the IPRC process and who looks after all of our record retention as well, that we wouldn't go with that different number. We would make it consistent for all of our records. So if you recall that discussion, I'm looking at Amy and Diane that, so I'm confirming that with you. No, it's until age 31. Right, that all psych, speech, social work, all of those records we keep until age 31. It's for some of the disciplines, it's longer than other. Like, so depending on the college, some of them asked for 18 years of age plus a period of time. Some of them asked for X number of years after the last period of service. Like it varies by college, and so we decided and our practice with all the other ones has been, let's just keep them until age 31. That way we're not going through files and saying which is which. So they all get the maximum amount of retention time. And there was a question at the top of Standard 8, which I'm going to slide to for you to see. Sorry. And this one I was looking for if there's any question or agreement for SEAC. Sorry. Am I past Standard 8? Well past it. Sorry about that. I'm almost there. Standard 10, we're in Standard 9. Come on. That's Standard 9? Yeah, one more. Standard 8. soon. Here we go. So there was a question about our keeping this or making this change in language. Was this necessary or helpful? The intent was that this was more helpful for parents in reading this, in understanding the intent here. Remember, this is around categories and definitions. So the question that you asked me was whether or not we had to have this change. The answer is no. The intent here was that this would add more clarity for parents. So if there's a preference here one way or the other. I'm trying to read it without breaking it. So it's really about it being individualized. That yes, we look at diagnoses and other information, but the intent here is to say that it really looks at each individual student based on their individual assessments of strengths and needs. So if that's helpful language, great. If it's not, doesn't have to be decided in this moment.
Any question or comment on that or the intent behind it? I think all it's really trying to do is separate a medical diagnosis from a psychoeducational assessment and prescription for a particular program replacement or assistive device, anything along those lines, really.
No comment. So any preference whether this was a staff suggestion that would be add more clarity for parents and for staff? Does it help, do you think, or not? I'm seeing a nod from Amy. Any other thinking? Preference? None? You're fine with it? Okay. And so those were my follow-ups. Otherwise, everything is as we discussed. So what will happen from here then is we'll have to decide. We'll probably have some discussion with trustees about how to share this with them in terms of the changes, and this will come to the board because we've done this a little bit differently this year using Google Docs. So, but this will come to the board for initial information I think it's in March on the agenda, I believe. And then again, back here and back to the trustees for approval in June. Okay.
Amy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I really like the forwardness of saying that this is based on the needs of individual students. It's more forward thinking, so I really like that. I just wonder if we need the word medical in front of condition. I would think it would be fine just to say undiagnosed condition, because not all conditions are medical. That's the only change I would make. I do like the way that it's phrased. Just that one word.
Yeah, I don't see why that couldn't come out if that's going to be more. The whole intent is to be helpful, right? So, okay, we can take that out. Okay. Any final questions or comments in terms of the revisions to the SPED plan for the 18-19 year? No? Great. Okay. So my thanks to, number one, to staff for their, oh, sorry. You're on the list?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Don.
It was just, like, I think we were supposed to make little things on the side, were we? Because I did make a couple, I didn't know.
No.
No?
Sorry.
It
Yeah.
was hard to understand how,
Yeah.
when it was sent out. It was just Action High School, I thought that was cute.
Oh.
Instead of Acton. Yeah. But the other one was, there was just one part where you first started talking about when you switched out the LIN for the CCAC. And after you've gone through about 3 pages, there is a comment about how we have 2 LINs and which towns fit which LINs, but I was wondering if maybe that there should be a line about that at the beginning of it. Just about identifying which LIN belongs to which towns within our school board. Because it's a new concept.
Right.
And LIN, CCAC meant something. LIN doesn't mean anything to a lot of people
Yeah.
still.
We had 2 CCACs before as well, right? And that hasn't changed in terms of the division across Halton. Trying to think if we have any other services that are divided in all of those. Is it just the LIN? So, yeah, we could add that if that would be. I guess I'm not sure if it matters so much to staff because they just know they contact the LIN and they have the phone number for their area of which LIN to contact. And does it matter really to parents or?
Since some of the things are self-refer, it may be helpful.
Yeah, sure, we can add that in. So that would be in this standard 8, right, that we would add that.
I did make, you'll find my thing.
Okay. And, so Lauren, if you could catch that for me, we'll make sure we get that language in there. And then just to mention again, I know that I've said this once before, I'll say it one more time, that we have switched to a new assessment tool for the nomination process for the primary gifted students, and that the full description of that will be included in the June June version. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Just while we're on this subject, we've taken a few different approaches over the years to how to review the special education plan. Back in the early time, it was all on paper, and we ended up with 3 different versions, and everyone had a different page 46, and it was a bit of a zoo. And then we tried everyone doing the grammatic and the little fine-tuning changes as a group. So now the current approach is the subcommittee meets and goes through it, bit by bit, looks at the staff recommendations, changes, makes their own, and so on. So I realized that the review and edit process for this was a little bit complicated this year. This is the first time trying it, but I wanted to know if anyone had any comments. I mean, Dawn has already mentioned that it was a bit complicated to follow. Did it work for everyone else, or was it too complicated to follow the document? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I think for those of us who were in the subcommittee, it was very well done because we could follow it all together. For people that were reading it afterwards, it may not have been so simple. However, you can see the strike-throughs and the comments on the side, so I think that may have helped. I thoroughly appreciated being in the room. It was very helpful because then we could have groupthink at the same time.
I agreed. I think it worked well, certainly at the subcommittee level. Yeah. If you're used to Word, you can do what is called blacklining, where it actually shows you the before and after, and it's very obvious where it's changed. Here, it actually shows up a suggestion. So it's got a strike through or a different color. A little harder to read, but it's about the only way we can do it in Google Docs. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to go through it. And if you have any things that come to mind, later on, please feel free to let me know. We'll include it in the plan for next year. And I would also like to thank everyone on the subcommittee for their help and their time on this. There's a lot of pages to go through and a lot of little changes to look at. And I commend everyone for their effort that they put in, and I think we had a good result. So next on the agenda is life skills review update. And is that you again, Mark? Yeah. Okay, over to you, please.
Thanks, Jason. So this came about, some of you may recall last year that we, in the discussion around the review of the SPED plan then, that the final report from the life skills review was included as an appendices and had been sitting there for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And we've had many other reviews and reports that weren't included as an appendices, and so I suggested that it was time to remove this. And the request at that time was, could we get an update on the recommendations, the actions taken on the recommendations, and then we could remove it. So that's the intent of this item tonight, is to give you an update, which was sent to you with the agenda, knowing that it won't be included as an appendices in the plan next year. So if you have had a chance to read that through, there are quite a few items, quite a few recommendations. They start on page, and they aren't numbered, but it starts on page 3, at the bottom of page 3 of the review report, sorry. And so there's quite a few there. And if you look through, almost all of them have been acted upon. You'll see that the vast majority of those changes have occurred. Some of them may have been difficult in terms of resources, board budget, etc. But like I said, the vast majority of them either have occurred or are occurring that you see there. So I don't think it's going to be efficient use of our time to go through them all. I'd rather open it up to questions if you have any. But they're all itemized in red at the end of each of those recommendations. So any questions?
Yeah, go ahead, please, Sophia.
It was great to see that a lot of the work that's been done on this, so that was awesome. Just had a couple of questions and notes that I made. For number 3, class schools specifications should be developed for each placement type. That's awesome, and it's so important. I'm just wondering, how were these specifications developed, and what stakeholders were consulted? Things like classroom sizes and everything that's listed then.
Sure. So some of these are a mixture of our the ministry. If you can appreciate, the ministry funds us for a certain size of class based on the type of program. So special education programs get a certain square footage. So we as a board we could choose to make a class smaller or larger than that, but knowing that, for example, if we made a class larger, we then need to find the money to do that from somewhere else in the building, right, if we're building a new school. So just for you to know that weighs in a little bit, right? We can only go so big before, okay, this is taking away from the gym, for example, or from the art room, or et cetera. So that's part of it. We also, over time, have got input from staff from across the system, as well as from our staff within student services, who over time have said that works really well. This, could be larger, or this, you need to reconfigure this part of the space, etc. So that kind of input we get quite regularly. I was just in Boyne public school in Milton last week, and did a bit of a tour of the life skills classes there and talked to staff for quite a while about what worked and didn't, and were they like more or less of this, and should we relocate that? And they gave me some really good feedback. So that kind of thing, that was sort of more of an informal one.
Yeah.
But when we do new designs and new builds, we go right away after it's been opened and ask staff intentionally for that feedback.
Yeah, I think, and that was our concern, is that, of course, the people that know best about these kids and their learning styles and what's best for them, like the EAs and you know, parents and all that, and staff, of course, too. So as long as they were consulted and in the process, that's important. I'm just wondering, are we able to get sort of any specifications on room sizes, square footage, windows, things that are listed here? Is SEAC able to get? Do you have a draft of that you guys have started to put together? Or?
Yeah.
Because some of our families have asked about that.
All of that we have all that in detail in facility services, because they have to provide that those go in the design specs when they go out for bidding. And then they also go, obviously, then to the, they're created by the architects and then go out to the contractors, et cetera, in terms of doing that work. So we have all that laid out. Some of it's quite detailed. Like for these rooms, there'd be pages and pages of design spec in terms of the size of sure, it has the square footage and all that kind of thing, but it actually has the size of the drawer, the counter height, the number of sinks, all that specific numeric detail is in all that, because that's how we get it built to spec.
Okay.
So
this may be obvious, but then are we using these specifications for the expansion of Robinson and the renovations to Nelson?
Yes, and improved upon. So every time we do this, we're evaluating what's working, what could be better, what could be changed, right? So after our last work, we then gather that information and bring it into the next. So that's occurring. So yes, but still working to always improve it. So back to your question, do you want all that nitty gritty?
No. I don't think that like families were concerned about like some classroom sizes, windows, the big stuff. You know, so that would be. I mean, I can go back to the family and ask if I don't think they want drawer sizes, obviously, but
we've
concerned about space and that.
Yeah. So maybe if there's some broader things that they would like to know,
I can go back then.
Yeah, maybe ask. Otherwise, and the other thing I'd be concerned is that if I could just ask, facility services to say, give them the design specs, but it's going to be way too much information that, and it's all in sort of contractor language, which I don't think is going to be helpful for families either. So maybe if you can get a little more detail. Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Okay, good. Thank you for that, Mark. Oh, yeah, please go ahead, Sophia.
Sorry, this affects our family, so I have a couple. Bear with me. Number 5, this has been a major concern with CCAC and the services and training and the connection between schools. A lot of our families are saying often the school is not aware of when the therapists are coming in. Sometimes they show up and the child's not there, like the communication's not happening. Often parents have said, the teachers are trying to, they waste a lot of time trying to find a space for the child to work. And so now we've lost that time, therapy time. They also say sometimes the EAs are not freed up to sit down in the therapy session with the child. And then, they're just getting a piece of paper, and often that doesn't translate into really good therapy and follow through. So what the parents are concerned about is, can we better that communication between school and the therapists? How do we make that more seamless so the kids are actually getting the therapy that they need and the help that they need?
Great question. That's something we want as well. We don't want lost therapy time for our.
The board's paying for it, right?
Yeah.
So we want to utilize it, maximize.
Yeah, we're actually not, but
we're receiving. We want to benefit. We want the kids to benefit from the board's receiving.
Yeah, we as taxpayers are all paying for
we're
that,
all paying for
and want to see bang for the buck for sure. But ultimately, it's about benefit for students. So Yeah, we want to know when they're coming, can plan for that, make sure the space is available, that staff are available if there's learning to happen in terms of what's going on, all that. We want all that too. I guess I'm going to look to Jane again or Margaret. I don't know if is this an issue that we're hearing about that I know sometimes spaces for sure, especially you go into a school in Milton where we know we're full up and we got 16 portables on site and all that's space is a challenge for sure.
But I'm wondering if there was, if from the top down, if a protocol was sort of emailed to staff that, let's talk about this in September. This is a designated space where when the therapist comes in, this is how the communication is going to happen, because it's such a waste of resources. When you've missed, they're so hard to come by, these sessions, and when you have the sessions and 20 minutes is wasted. Yeah. Right? It's not effective.
I guess that's the part that I don't know how are we as staff hearing that this is an issue? No. So I guess we'd need to dig into that a bit more, because if it is more of a systemic problem, then we need to be articulating that. If it's isolated, which I'd like to just talk to you more about, then I'd like to follow up with those schools to better understand that. I can say that space is a challenge certainly in more of our schools, as you would be aware. So the timing and the planning for that is very important. So we maximize that.
Yeah, I can just a heads up. I can assure you it's not isolated. I've spoken to several certs at a couple schools, and obviously they care about the kids, so they're equally concerned. So it's not just the parents' perspective, but I know the certs are concerned that they're coming in, the therapists finally they're here, and
Sure.
Sure.
Effective. We'll dig into that. If you're telling us that's the case, sure, we'll dig into that because
maybe send a survey. We can try surveying.
Because we
not
do
to create more work for you, Jane.
but we do. We spend a lot of time talking with schools about dedicated space specifically for outside services coming in. So whether it's a therapist or a caseworker of some type. Of our own staff, our own itinerant staff coming in, that might be a speech pathologist or a CYC, those staff as well, when space is at such a premium in schools, we say, specifically this, this might be one room that's for them, or if that can't be the case, then is there a room that can be allocated but have a schedule developed where that sign-up can be regular, so you're not showing up and saying, now what?
Exactly. And I think that maybe if the message goes, maybe not even to CERS, if it comes to the principals, that this is, make this a priority, it's important because this is a wasted service then.
Right.
Right? Then I think it'll get some attention.
I'll even say that in some schools, the principal's office ends up being the place where some of the services are delivered because there's nowhere else, right? And so the normal practice would be it's scheduled, the space is available, the service is provided, all is good. The challenge is when the school has such limited space, but you also know that some things happen some days when, right, and therefore schools are doing their best to make things work, but you have some crisis that goes on, and so we have
I think the families
space used and that
they
kind
start
of
to
thing.
get frustrated when they know it's so hard to come by these appointments. So you get 3 in the year. And then you're losing 10 minutes each time finding a spot.
Sure.
It's just,
We'll look at some messaging that we can send to schools about that.
Any other questions regarding Life Skills Review? Okay, then we will move on to big topic suggestions. We've got 15 minutes on the schedule for this, which brings us to about 8 o'clock. I'm going to plug into the magic computer and I'll just be taking notes as people throw out ideas, and there'll be lots and lots of ideas, right? So, that's still got the protective shield on. Hold on a second. Do you have a question now, Denise, or for
a big topic?
Okay. And I'll ask you to facilitate the list of speakers. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. You didn't want to see, did you?
There, that's better. Oh, that is, I can see why they put those things on the ceiling. Okay, where's my stuff? Oh, it's gonna be one of these. Oh, jeez. Hold on a second. I got 500 purple dots. Where'd my mouse go? Yeah, I'm just, there we are. Give me half a second here. I want to see if I can get this to mirror so I can see both. Because right now I can't see what's on the projector. No, I've had this happen before. I want to see if I can, that's not going to help at all. I can't see what's on the screen. Oh, there it is.
Or did you take note? You got it on both.
As they say in music, viola. There we go. One thing you can count on with Chromebooks is they keep changing, whether you want it to or not. These updates come down the wire, and some things good, some things not always. So what I wanted to do is just have an open session for people to throw in ideas about topics they would like to see, what we've typically called big topics, or those can be presentations by board staff, presentations by anyone, associations doing here's what we do and get to know us kind of presentation, questions that are of a larger nature that you want answered, or subject matters to be reviewed. So Denise is kind enough to facilitate the list for me. I'll be taking notes to make sure I'm capturing what people are suggesting, and I'll turn it over to Denise.
All right, I put my name in first. I think the topic that Sophia brought up of the IPRC and SRT and the communication and the communication to parents, making sure that there's a two-way understanding of what is happening at SRT versus what is happening at IPRC, what are parents' rights, or what can parents do if they disagree with SRT is what they're bringing to IPRC, all of that sort of what surrounds that. I mean, we know the process. We've had it discussed many times, but I think it's the communication piece with the parents and making sure that the parents have a really good understanding of what they're agreeing to or not agreeing to and what their role is in all of it. All right, next up is Diane.
So we had a few suggestions down, and the first one was open two-way communication. So we're on the same page there. We'd like to see a presentation on learning disabilities and all the comorbidities. And we'd also like to see a return of association presentations. Okay, understanding learning disabilities and all the comorbidities attached to such.
I think so. All right, thank you, Diane. Amy.
Going to get back up on my soapbox and talk about transitions, especially in the elementary panel. I would like to see us reducing the number of transitions that our students have to make, even within the same placement. This is particularly difficult for students that have exceptionalities, and feeling like they belong somewhere is extremely important during these developmental years, and if they're being moved about and don't have a sense of permanence in the school that theoretically they should be in for 10 years, it's difficult for them. And I would really like to see us work on finding ways of allowing students to remain in a school for as long as possible so that they can build those relationships.
Thanks, Amy. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything on? I don't have any other speakers on the list, so is there anyone else who wants to add something to our things we want to talk about? Yes, Kim.
So one of the things I think would be great for parents, assuming they're watching, to understand is just as part of the process, what is available to them, or what types of accommodations, I guess, and placements can be made for in different various situations. I know that's really broad, but oftentimes I find parents are just looking for a way forward and aren't even sure what options are available, so they might find that helpful. Another idea, just for our purposes, it would be great to see some of the great things that are going on in the schools already. So, and it can be done even once every month, just a little piece about, okay, here's what's happening at this school, and here's what they're doing that's unique and interesting, and here's how they're engaging students in a different way. And even down to, I gave an Inspire Award to a student at Craig Kilberger, and she's just this amazing person, and I would love to have her come and just talk about some of the things that she's an expert in, being a student in our system. So some of these inspiring pieces, I think, would be great for us to see as well.
Thanks, Kim. Sophia?
I love Kim's idea. I think that's so motivational for us to see, but also for teachers, like just sharing best practices. So I don't know if there's a forum in the special education tab of the website for teachers to share with each other, but I love that because I think there are so many great things happening in the board, and often we're inspired by each other. So instead of recreating the wheel, if we have a forum to share, people can replicate that in different schools. What I wanted to add, and I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, was like the EA allocation, EA consistency. A lot of our families have been complaining about just my child has, 4 or 5 EAs during the day, or in a week they change so often. And I think this connects back to the, health and sex education and our kids. Stats showing that, kids with intellectual disabilities have the greatest amount of abuse. So I think that directly relates to, so we have to teach them not to, you're not just a stranger. So I have a lot of ideas here. I'm thinking consistency in EAs, a greater protocol with supply EAs coming in. So are we telling a child it's okay to go to the bathroom with whatever supply comes in? Because that's not really sending a good message to our kids about privacy and safety. Are you able to keep up? I'm sorry, there's lots of ideas there. Yeah, how and why do EAs get moved? Yeah.
That really needs to be too, right?
Yeah.
Having been in the system, having a child in the system having had a child in the system at the life skills levels for 15 some years now, I think, 12, 15 years. It's not always clear why EAs get moved around.
Not at all.
And we don't even know necessarily. He comes home with a communications log because he's nonverbal that tells us what happened that day, and all of a sudden it's getting signed by someone else. Say, what happened there. So that's why I put in, why did they get moved, how to make it more consistent. And you had another point, Sophia.
Greater protocol around supply EAs coming in. So are we just telling our kids that any supply EA that walks in the door, sure, you can go to the bathroom with them, so, because then we're not teaching our kids about safety and privacy and all that. And we know that the health curriculum is so important. So how are we teaching our kids about that? So maybe it's not the supply that accompanies them or assists them with toileting. Maybe it's someone who is familiar instead. So we release the teacher to maybe take them or.
Yeah, I'd probably expand on some ideas there. I'm just putting what comes out because sometimes it is as simple as toileting. Some kids are not allowed to leave the classroom on their own. Others are, right? So yeah, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you got everything. And I guess the importance of the health curriculum, teaching our kids. Are we, I think it's really informal. So when we talk about our kids, they definitely need to be part of that health and sexual curriculum, but how are we bringing it to their level? Like, it's not going to be on an IEP. Often it's not on the IEP. We just assume the teacher is going to talk to our kids in a way that they'll understand, but that doesn't always happen. So maybe they're going to the library during that time, but I don't know how you're going to get that down there.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning part of what you were saying. Were you saying sexual education?
Yes. Making sexual education a priority for our kids, and making it accessible in a way that they understand. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's a lot of pressure. And maybe change that to sex ed for kids with special needs. Perfect. Take your time.
Is that it, Sophia, or did you have something else?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So again, I don't have anybody else on the speaker list. If anyone has any other ideas, I think looks like we have quite a few. Some great ideas too.
I need a foot switch for that sometimes. Just to cover the top level stuff that we talked about, obviously open two-way communication is always important, but something we want to look at how to improve. Information for parents somehow on what accommodations, placements, and so on are available to them. Some of that overlaps with working together, but it is an important thing for people to know. I agree. It would be nice for SEAC to show us some of the great things that do happen. Talk about best ways for staff to share best practices. Understanding learning disabilities and associated comorbidities. Communications about the IRC process to parents, including IPRCs, et cetera, SRT meetings, IEPs. Presentations backed by associations. We used to have those. I found it always fascinating to see what each association did. We've had a fair amount of turnover here too. So that can be a good thing as well. General information on transitions and so on, and EA allocations, movements, assignments within the classroom and so on. So I will take these, I'll put them in a document and circulate them so people can add comments to them or whatever. I know we've done a really quick look at these things here, but I appreciate everyone throwing in their ideas. Very good, thank you. Next up is questions from the public. Do we have any? No. As I mentioned before, I'm going to, obviously we're not going to get it done right away. Hopefully by September, have some sort of electronic method for the public to submit questions to us. Since they can view us, they should also be able to communicate with us that way as well. Seeing none of those, next up is SEAC discussion and question period. So the floor is open. Tammy, go ahead, please.
I just had a question around the spec ed plan. Is it available in French online?
No.
Is that a requirement that it has to be in French?
I don't know. I can look into it. I don't think there's, if it is, then there's lots of things that would have to be available in French that we don't have.
Is that it, Tammy? Just the one question? Good, thank you. Next is Amy, please.
Yes, well, I guess I could ask this under superintendent's report, but one of our fellow trustees wanted to know whether or not the information that was gathered regarding the CPP classes that you went on the tours in Peel, whether or not SEAC could see that information and perhaps have it presented, because there could have been some significant learnings there, and we'd all like to know.
If you could leave that with me to think about, because we sort of didn't gather it into a report kind of format. We did take some notes and took some pictures, and sort of lots got stored up in people's heads and then brought back into discussions and those kinds of things, but we didn't sort of draft it all, right? Put it all down, in some sort of form. So let me think about that. I appreciate that. That would be a good thing to share. I'm just not sure if it's recorded to do that. So.
Sophia, go ahead, please.
My apologies for all the questions. I've missed a couple meetings, so I have lots of catch up to do. We heard of a situation where a student had qualified for home instruction, but there were no teachers available to teach. So my question is, what does the board do in the situation to ensure that the student gets the help that they need?
I'll start on this one. I don't know if Jane or Margaret, you might want to chime in, but we don't have, well, we have a number of instances of students requiring home instruction. And these are circumstances where they can't attend. They require a medical note about their ability to not attend. And we provide them with 3 to 5 hours of instruction a week, depending on their circumstances. And so in most cases, not all, but many cases, that it's often the classroom teacher who will do that in some cases.
Sorry, which classroom teacher?
Let's say you have a student in grade 5 who's, broke both legs in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it'll be the classroom teacher, teacher of that grade 5 class, who sometimes will do the home instruction. That happens in some cases. If not, because I'm saying that's if that arrangement's possible, it's great, because then the continuity of the classroom program, they can bring that into the instruction.
I'm thinking of somebody with like a medical requirement that they're not able to come to the classroom to access, and I know you have to jump through quite a bit of hoops to even be qualified.
Right.
So there was this scenario came up where a family was really upset because they were approved.
Right.
And they were then told that no teacher picked up the job, or there's no teacher available to do it. And so as a result, the child desperately needed the support, was approved, but no teacher picked up the job and they didn't get that support. So I guess my question was, where are these jobs posted? Is it internally? Is it externally? Because we know there's lots of teachers looking for jobs right now.
Yeah, and I might look to Jane around the detail of the posting, or I don't know if Gabby, if you can talk to that, but some of it is, principals will start with who is there someone they know in their in their sort of their regular workings who can do the job. Like I said, sometimes it's a teacher within the school. Sometimes it's an occasional teacher who is, perhaps works in the school with some frequency, because the benefit is that they may have a better connection with the staff and know what's the specifics of that classroom program, and that can help. But if not, then we'll post it to whoever is available to take that job, recognizing that when our occasional teachers are really busy, they're all working during the day, right? So then it's their ability to pick it up and do it after hours. Jane, you want to chime in on that? So it's, it's not for lack of effort.
Yeah, just so I have something to take back.
Yeah.
Help me understand. So
Yeah.
in this case, there was a situation where the home section, there was no teachers available. And the board, what do they do at that point?
They don't give up. They keep looking. They keep posting it. They'll call whoever. They'll ask occasional teachers when they're coming into the school. They'll share messages with their colleagues saying they're looking and looking. But in the end, we're limited to our ability to find people to do the work, as it would be for any occupation, right? Any job. So they keep trying.
Is this something that you've heard of that's happened often, or is it rare? I'm just trying
On
to get
rare
some
cases,
understanding.
but I'm not sure if I know of any where they could not find someone. They eventually do.
Okay.
Sometimes not as fast as we would like, and and takes a little more creativity sometimes. But I don't know of any circumstances. I'm looking to my admin colleagues if they know of a case where we just couldn't find anyone.
No, I don't either. And I just, again, as Mark has asked before, if this is, I'm going to assume this is a limited number of cases, or hopefully one. If you could let us know who it is, because we have done some things that perhaps a principal who hasn't had that experience wouldn't know about. So, for example, at a school I was at, we could not find, same thing, but I went to the high schools and there were a number of teachers who only had a couple of sections and they wanted to pick up more work but wouldn't have seen an ad, so I was able to. So we can help, with some different ideas that perhaps the school hasn't thought of. So if you could put us in touch with them,
Yeah,
we
no,
can maybe reach out.
that's awesome. That's lovely, because that's what I was really surprised. So maybe, that would also be good communication for you to share with all staff across the board, that if the situation arises, that they don't have to worry, they're not in isolation, that you guys can help centrally?
Well, when they've struggled, we've heard about it. So we have done what Jane is suggesting and have, helped them with where else they might look or how they might post it in a different way or those kinds of things. So, yeah, if they can reach out to us, because we have helped them eventually find someone. And you want it to be a good fit too, right? So.
So just my own question of clarification on that. You're drawing from the existing contingent of faculty, and it's really up to that faculty member to volunteer to do that work, which I assume they're compensated for. So it's effectively overtime for them, but outside of class hours. Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time? Okay. Good question, Sophia. I've never heard of that one before. All this, so that's interesting. Up next then is. Sorry. Go ahead,
I have
please.
one last really good question. We have several new members, and many of our kids are in kindergarten. And this has come up several times at our meetings. Parents want to know if a parent chooses or would prefer their child to have an IEP in kindergarten. Is it in the special education plan that they do have that option available to them?
And I'm really going to turn to you, Jane, on this one. Maybe I'll start a bit, but get up there. With the student being so young and so new, we certainly encourage the staff, and we're involved in lots of support of those students around looking at all the strategies that we can try in terms of the classroom environment, in terms of the instructional approaches, lots of things to help that student thrive, because it can be it's very individual, right? Depending on is there already a diagnosis and other things like that. But really trying to focus on the strategies available and resources sort of for all students to help those students thrive before going to an IEP. Not that we don't want to, but we want to make sure is that we're not just going there right away and not doing all those things we should do from a good instructional practice standpoint first. And I'll let Jane go from there. She can correct me if she needs to.
Never. I think I would say similar things. The kindergarten program is a program that's quite broad and allows for a lot of different developmental entry points for students. So we would expect that the school and parents were engaging in really good conversation about what is the purpose of the IEP, versus what program does the student need? What are all the supports that the teacher and ECE need to ensure that they are putting in place environmentally in terms of the developmental level resources, all of those pieces which need not be on an IEP. But Mark is right. If the parent, we're not about blocking that either. There's nothing saying you cannot have an IEP in kindergarten, but we're cautious.
Okay, yeah, I think for us, it was a lot of our kids are they're being released from Erin Oak, and they have reports from their SLPs, they have reports from their OTs and PTs. So parents are concerned, who's going to implement these goals, and we love play-based, but we need a little bit of structure. So some of the questions coming up are, some schools are more receptive to the IEP for kindergartners, others are not. So I need sort of a clear answer that I can take back to my families to say, if you want it, the school is willing to work with you. So is that correct? Am I correct in my understanding?
I would hope that the answer is always the school is willing to work with you, yes.
Okay. And so is that in the special education plan? So I like your draft, but again, I wasn't on the committee and the context wasn't there. So looking through the lines drawn, I wasn't sure if I saw that there. I wanted to double check with you guys if that's there.
Didn't make any changes around that. So the language would be, the basic premise would be the same. So we have to go back and look to see.
Again, I wonder, because I honestly can't bring to mind, perhaps when we're looking at working together again, we need to have a bigger piece on kindergarten, because we certainly are having a lot of discussion about supporting students in kindergarten. So I think that's another good opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
Just to go back to what Sophia just said, is that in the spec ed plan? My immediate reaction was it doesn't need to be in the spec ed plan, it's board protocol.
Very true, yeah. If we wrote down everything that we do in the spec ed plan, it would be, pretty thick.
Yeah, I do think it does sound like something that would be a little less formally described, but a good place in the working together document, because that's, I think, typically where parents would look to first, because it is structured that way as well. Okay. Anyone else? No. Okay, so then we are moving on to superintendent's report. I'll pass it over to Mark.
Thanks, Jason. 3 items in my report, and I apologize that it came to you today. So they are, one, about the accommodation of students in elementary self-contained gifted programs in Oakville. So the beginning of last week, I sent you a draft report that's going to trustees tomorrow and asked for feedback. I didn't get any, or any questions. So, that I like to bring it to you earlier than that, so we have the chance for feedback before it goes into the board package. But the timing of things coming in terms of projections and numbers from our planning department just made that challenging. So. But I didn't get any feedback from SEAC members, but I'd be welcome to take any questions now if you have any. Otherwise, that report is going for information to trustees tomorrow night, and then that will be followed with communication out to families on Thursday after the board meeting. So, and I'll go on then to the.
Just a sec. Go ahead, please, Don.
As although we'd like the kids to stay in school groupings, and it'd be wonderful to have grade 1 to grade 8, we know there's limitations with these programs being put into neighborhood schools, and you can't always project what the neighborhood's going to do, even if the uptake of the program stays similar, and you can project that, you can't always know what's going to happen and who's going to build a condominium or townhouses or something near a neighborhood school. Because I think Morton, they thought, would have lots of room, but it's ended up not being able to hold that program, correct? Yeah.
Okay, next on to association reports.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
So the second, I'll talk to all three if that's okay. The second is the work going on around the CPP transitions and improvements in Burlington. So you can see my synopsis there about that work is ongoing. And as Amy mentioned earlier, we did tour some sites in Peel and Toronto. And we're in the process of taking ideas and turning them into designs. And so that work is ongoing. I believe we have another meeting with the architects on Thursday morning, looking at on those drafts. And certainly we'll be bringing those to SEAC for you to look at and see the kinds of things that are being planned there. So that's in the works. And then number 3 is the secondary gifted accommodation for Burlington. And as you know, when Terry Blackwell was here, she talked to you about the survey that has been put out to all parents of students identified gifted in Burlington. That survey has closed, and those results have been analyzed and recommendations being drafted that will be shared at SEAC next month for input. We've been trying to schedule a meeting with ABC, and it has been challenging for both of us, and so we're going to try to meet prior to SEAC in March. I think that's when we have that booked, right? And so for some more in-depth discussion with ABC, but also for discussion here at SEAC at that meeting. And then after that, taking your input and then bringing that to the Board of Trustees after that. Knowing that the plan for going forward with that is as part of the other changes happening, the transitions going on, which wouldn't be until 2020. So still lots of time. And that's so more, you'll be hearing more detail about that next meeting.
There was a question from Kim.
Thanks, and it's actually another question from a trustee who couldn't make it tonight, but sent this question just on the tours and the consultation of the program. She was wondering if teaching staff or people who are in the classrooms were also on those, did those tours, and if they were giving feedback on the types of things that they would want in those classrooms.
So just to clarify, Kim, when you say were they on the tours as in our teaching staff, or did we talk to the teaching staff in those schools?
So let me just see what she says. She thinks it's great about the consultations that are ongoing around the design, and she likes that so many were included in the consultation, and wondered if they're also consulting with classroom teachers as part of that, I guess. Okay, so we did have on the tour was myself and Terry Blackwell, facilities staff, staff from the architectural firm, and also our instructional program leaders from student services. So that's who went from the board on these tours. We talked a lot with
teachers and EAs and other staff in those schools when we're on site, moving, room to room, seeing the facilities. We interacted a lot with the staff, hearing about their, how they utilize their facilities. For example, we're in a kitchen, so we were talking with the EAs about how that was used, what the program looked like for students, et cetera. We were in a greenhouse talking to the site lead about how they would use that in their high school program, those kinds of things. So we heard a lot from the frontline staff in those sites that we visited. So then back here in Halton, we bring those ideas back, draft those, but then we're going to be going then to the staff of both of the schools involved. So we're sharing drafts and ideas with the staff at MMR, at Bateman, and I'll say at Bateman because there aren't CPP staff at Nelson right now, right? So it's the Bateman staff and the MMR staff that we're going to be sharing with and getting their input and ideas as well. Does that answer your question?
Diane, go ahead, please.
Mark, this is just a clarification question. Are we going to be receiving between now and our June meeting an update on the pilot project for the self-contained classroom for students with autism?
For sure. I think I gave you a little snapshot just that we had a great start in our last meeting. Yeah, we're going to be before the end of the year for sure. I couldn't say when yet, but before the end of June.
Any other questions? So now we can actually move on to association reports. Do we have any this evening? Diane, go ahead.
Sorry, Camille Halton, just a reminder that our conference is coming up. The early bird deadline is about a month from now, so it's key to get in on that. Our keynote speaker, Damian Cooper, is an educational consultant now in his retirement, but he was in his previous life a Halton board English teacher, special ed consultant, research consultant. So he does a lot around assessment. He's going to be talking about the types of three types of assessment that we should be taking a look at the triangulation, and that the ministry has been advocating for the last 2 or 3 years. His book is called Redefining Fair Assessment in the Mixed Ability Classroom. So we've asked him to have a learning disabilities focus, but I'm sure he will veer off that a bit because he does a lot with mixed ability classrooms. He does a lot for the regular classroom. We also have a lot happening that teachers can be checking up on because the Empower program is going to be presented, what's happening in the province. One of the popular speakers, Dean Hike, is coming back to talk about the calm in the storm. So this is how teachers can use meditation to keep things calm in the classroom rather than aiming at the students. One of our own teachers, the department head at Milton District, is going to be talking about how technology can bridge the gap for learners with learning disabilities. And we have a couple of people who were at the ministry understanding how anxiety and processing speed and working memory affect teaching and learning. And we have one gentleman coming in who's going to be talking to us about teaching younger kids the code, computer code. So it's called the Code Breaker. So there's several there for self-contained classroom teachers. There's for CERTs. I think there's a lot there for CERTs. I think there's a lot there for parents. So if you would, I just have 4 or 5 printed out. So if you're interested, please take one. And if there isn't one left, please email me and I will send it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sophia.
I just want to share that we are running the World Down Syndrome Day contest, open to all public, Catholic, French, elementary, secondary schools in Halton. And it's great prizes. You can win up to $3,000 for your school. And it's just schools are creating videos about inclusive education, equality in the schools, friendship, all those lovely things.
Thank you. Denise?
I know I'm not an association, but I are the Optimist Clubs of Halton Hills, Milton, Burlington, and Oakville are holding our annual oratorical contest, which can result up to $22,000 in scholarships, depending if they get to the world competition. I will send you guys the information. The topic is Where Are My Roots of Optimism? Our topic is always something around optimists. And basically every student, all students under the age of 18 are eligible to submit. They qualify at the club level, then at the zone level, the district level, and then they have the opportunity to go to the world level. The latest student who represented our district was out of Puslinch, so out of our zone. So I'll send you the information. It's a cool opportunity if you know any students who like to public speak and might like to win some scholarships in the process.
Great, thank you for those. Next up are trustee reports. Amy, go ahead.
Yes, trustees received some information about Bill 191 that is past its first reading. It is the FASD education bill, and we are talking about perhaps writing a letter of support to the government on this bill and wanted to get some feedback from SEAC. I can give you a little bit of information about the bill. But basically, it is about supporting students with fetal alcohol syndrome and in the education system, and doing that formally in the Education Act. I don't know if you're aware of the bill or not, but I wanted to bring it to your attention and just ask for some feedback.
Yeah, go ahead, please, Kim.
Just further to trustee reports. At our last meeting, there were no action items on our last board meeting. At the one tomorrow, there will be the Milton number 10 boundary review coming, and the information item that you're already aware of regarding the Oakville this gifted accommodation report. And just further to what Amy was talking about, with the information about the bill that came through, I was kind of curious when it came through because I immediately thought, oh, I wonder if they could get involved with SEAC, because that's a great way to give board input. And so I found that there is a Halton fetal alcohol spectrum disorder website, at the very least. It looks to be, it says a collaborative consisting of dedicated professionals and parents who represent Halton-based service agencies. So it sounds like it would meet the qualifications to perhaps be a member on SEAC. And I thought I would just bring that information here in case anyone had any contacts or would like to reach out to them to perhaps become a member, because December is coming up and that's our new rollover of terms. So it would be great to have more associations on board if this qualifies.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. I had them on my list to contact. I tried reaching them about 2 years back, but they didn't really have any kind of local chapter. So hopefully now they would be have the ability, the time, and be qualified to get a seat on SEAC. But thanks again for that. Rochelle, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Although this feels like old news, it came out after our last SEAC meeting. So on January 16th, the Ministry of Education accepted the results of the administrative review of the Burlington High School closure process undertaken by the Halton District School Board. That will result in the closure of Lester B. Pearson and Robert Bateman High Schools. Administrative facilitator Margaret Wilson's report highlighted the board's review process as being open and that the board made a reasonable decision on behalf of the Burlington High School students. Wilson further encouraged the parents and the board to work constructively to ensure a smooth transition not only for the special needs students, but for all affected students in all programs. Further to that, the Halton District School Board is thrilled to receive provincial funding to enable the move of 2 existing childcare programs and retrofit them to provide expanded childcare spaces much needed in the community. Pearson Cooperative Nursery School will relocate from Lester Pearson High School to Brant Hills Public School in Burlington to be opened for September 2018. The Lord Elgin YMCA Child Care Center will move from Robert Bateman High School to Frontenac Public School in Burlington. The opening of Frontenac is yet to be released pending design. And my last item has to do with summer school. In North Burlington, Frank J. Hayden Secondary School will now offer high school summer courses in a fully air-conditioned larger facility. Registration will open in April. Students currently enrolled at a high school must register at their home school. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Amy, would you have a link to information about that bill that you could forward to us?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can forward
That'd be
that.
great. Thank you. Next up then are committees and other reports.
Sorry,
First-
Jason. I had
Go ahead, Kim.
something I forgot, a couple of good news items. One is that our local MPP, one of our local MPPs, we just found out in the past few weeks, became the Minister of Education. So it was very exciting. And also this past week, we heard about Boyne Public School today, but the principal at Boyne was one of the top principals in Canada, and he received that award last week.
Good. Thanks for that. So committees and other reports, special education review, is that you, Denise?
It is. So I sent out kind of a little bit of an update when we met, the steering committee last met, but I have a little bit more. Elena was great. She provided me a little bit more information. So she's collected a ton of data on the assessment, referral, identification, and placement pathways for autism, learning disabilities, and gifted. She's collected a ton of information from key stakeholders, from parents, from teachers, from other support staff that she is bringing into a set of recommendations. And she's also gathered all of the ministry information. So she's done a ton of data collection. She's also talking to 5 other school boards, following up with telephone interviews to gather some information on their special education programming. And she's going to add that into the recommendations and into the information. There is a subgroup that is meeting that will be actually crafting and shaping the recommendations based on the data. So that report will actually come, the committee will be getting that report to discuss the beginning of March. That report will then come to SEAC and will then go to the trustees. So you will have an opportunity to see that report and for us to be able to discuss it and look at it, give feedback prior to it going to the trustees. So you will probably see that, probably not for our March meeting, but do we have 2 meetings in March? Will it? Okay. March 2nd. When's our March meeting? Okay, it may come to our March meeting so that we can look at it and talk about it. I know that she has intent of getting it to the trustees as quickly as possible, but it will be coming here first. Then it will come March 6th. We see it March 2nd, yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you, Denise. Pick.
So we had a meeting, I guess it's only about a week and a half ago, of the conference committee. And so the date for this coming year is going to be October 13th. Location to be decided. It's time for it to come to the south again. Most likely, it would be wanting to be in Burlington, but with all the issues in Burlington with renovations and stuff like that, we may be looking at somewhere in Oakville, but very close to Burlington to bring it to the south, and then the following year we should be able to have it in Burlington. And just out of interest, the next PIC school reps regional meeting will be February 15th from 7 to 8:30 at the Milton Staff Learning Center.
Thank you, Dawn. Accessibility Coordinating Committee. Go ahead, Diane.
No report tonight. We meet Thursday morning.
Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Steering Committee? Do both?
Jump the gun. I'm not accessibility.
Yeah. I will just add that the next meeting is on April the 5th, and it's been moved to the Directors Board meeting. Trustee Harvey Hope is actually the trustee representative on accessibility coordinating.
Thank you, Rochelle. Working together document, that's Sherry. She's not here tonight. So we're going through these quickly. Next up is Lester B. Pearson to MMR transition team. That's me. I'm going to send this to Lorna so she has it. This may be a bit longer than any future reports just because I wanted to give you a bit of background. I attended my first meeting there was January 18th, which was actually their third meeting. There were presentations from their 3 subcommittees, Artifacts and Memorabilia, Student Voice, and Lester B. Pearson Celebration. There were also reports by the principals from both Lester B. Pearson and MMR, and board reports by Superintendents Blackwell and Pennyfather. So items of interest that I took from the meeting. Lester B. Pearson students had a welcome tour at MMR, and I was glad to hear that the CPP kids from MMR were at the front of the reception line, so they were prominent and visible there. Lester B. Pearson VP Rebecca Newcomb is moving to MMR as vice principal, so it's a lateral move for her. As Rochelle had already pointed out, the co-op nursery there is being moved to Brant Hills and being expanded. There is a student voice group on the committee. Unfortunately, there was no special education student representation on that group, so I requested that they look into finding some way of getting a kid from one of the with an IEP or in special education as part of that group, so that voice is being heard. One of the areas that had a bit of discussion was about the IEP reviews. My understanding is that those will be forms will be going out to parents mid-February requesting permission for Lester B. Pearson staff to share the information with MMR staff. Under the freedom of or privacy laws, they can't just transfer the documents without parental permission. So that should be happening mid-February. Lester B. Pearson has 340 students, 66 with IEPs, which is actually a much higher number than I would have thought for a school that small. Of concern, and I can voice this during the meeting and will continue to do so, that there were no specific plans for additional staffing to handle the extra workload for the transition plans necessary to get those 66 odd students transferred over to MMR. Plus, there's going to be the usual churn, right, with new arrivals and all that sort of thing. So there could be, well, you know, easily 70 plus transition plans that need to be worked out. I was quite concerned that that really didn't seem to be even on the radar, that, you know, they might need extra resources to do that. Mark may have a comment, but I'll wait until I'm done. Also, that there are no EAs at Lester B. Pearson. Not aware of that either. So they will not be moving, obviously, because there aren't any. Administrative staff at Lester B. Pearson will not be moving to MMR, and they will not be changing the school names either. It will stay as MMR, and there will be a tribute featured in the MMR lobby, most likely renaming the theater and perhaps part of the lobby with a display or something commemorating a little bit of the history of Lester B. Pearson, plus honoring the name Lester B. Pearson. Next meeting is Thursday, February 8th. That is for subcommittees only, and our next full meeting is April 12th. There was nothing available in March due to March break. So I will email all this to Lorna so she has it, and I welcome if you have any questions about that, please, let me know. Yes, Kim.
Sorry, Justin, just a question. It may just be a matter of terminology, but you said no administrative staff was moving from Pearson to MMR. I was under the understanding that one of the VPs was, in fact, moving from Lester B. Pearson to MMR.
That was the school office administrative staff. Did I not say that? So like the secretarial staff, in effect, are not moving. Yeah.
When I think administrative staff, I think principal, vice principal, and so on. So I think it's just a terminology. So
yeah, it's the staff working in the school office. That's what I meant to say. I thought I did, but thanks for pointing that out. Anything else? Mark, perhaps we can follow up on concerns about the extra transition workload that's going to be on the SRT teams and so on. Because I'm concerned that we've got 66 kids here that are moving, and this same plan is pretty much going to apply to Bateman, which is a much, much higher volume and higher needs kids. So it really needs to be in the resource plan for staff, that whether people get reallocated or whatever, to make sure that these are all handled. So.
Yeah, we can talk. You and I can talk further about that, Jason. Schools support this transition of students as part of their regular work. So I recognize there's going to be more here, but just to say that that's part of our regular processes that we do every spring in supporting students. Some of those transitions happen from one school to another. Other transition planning goes on within that same building because of the change in year, the change in teachers, the change in program for some students. So that's part of that as well. If there are specific needs, where our staff are having lots of dialogue with the Pearson staff about what that workload looks like. Some of our support staff are helping the Pearson staff with some of the planning work that's going on. But that's all part of their work, looking forward. And, I'm not sure if it's a fair comparison, Pearson to Bateman, because some of the needs of students coming from the CPP at Bateman would be much more significant. And so the planning that would be involved would be quite a bit more than that. But yeah, we can talk in more detail if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. And I bring it up, not saying that this had, well, I guess when it came up, my question was, are extra staff going to be allocated to help with this big spike? And the response was, no one's really seemed to have thought of that. Now, that was within that meeting. It may have had consideration outside of that, but that was my concern, and we can certainly talk about it later. Denise, go ahead, please.
So I just want to echo Jason's concerns. 66 students is, although it may not seem like a lot, it's a lot of students to transition at one time. And I understand that we transition students all the time. And to be frank, we're not all that great at it all the time. So my concern would echo Jason's, that when you are transitioning that many students at one time, that we would have to have some real serious contingency plans in place, and that there may need to be some extra staff there as they transition. So to hear that they hadn't considered it bothers me as well. And I understand there's a big difference between the Bateman students transitioning Pearson students. The needs are not probably comparable. But we don't want to minimize the needs of those Pearson students. And so that would be a real concern. And I get that's part of their regular job, but this is a lot of students at one time. So that's where my concern, I echo with Jason.
Sure, and we can talk about that, a bit further. The number, and once, my intent wasn't for it to sound like I was minimizing it all. But that number, you have to look at who those students are, right, and what those needs are, and some would need more support than others. So it's, I think we could look at that in more detail.
Any further questions on those topics? Okay. Thank you all for your presentations and reports.
Diane.
Oh,
Tammy came in.
Tammy, go ahead.
I'm not sure of the process, but are any of the certs being moved over from Pearson to Do we know if that's happening?
There is a staffing process that involves the staff from Pearson, and where they'll all be employed within the system, but the details of if and how they can move to or not, I'm not sure about. I don't know that detail, but I believe our plan is for Superintendent Terry Blackwell to come back next month and give us an update on this transition process. So I think she could probably answer that question much better than I.
So next is our next agenda, which I don't have off the top of my head. We're talking about Superintendent Blackwell coming back to talk about the transition planning for Lester B. Pearson moving to MMR.
Expected review report then.
Special education review?
Report,
Yeah. Oh, of course, that's March, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, I already wrote that down.
And we'll start talking about budget too.
Yeah, and we'll have to be talking about budget. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say budget.
It's okay, we can use the B word here. Yeah, I know some of you are new to that process, and it's interesting. There's a lot to learn about how budgeting and school funding operates. It's quite a learning experience. So that'll be for our next meeting. So at this point, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Diane, seconded by Lucille. All in favor? Any opposed? Diane, were you?
Dan was
Was that a lingering yes or a no? Okay, so I think that was unanimous. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
So it doesn't have to be a SEAC item, but it's really information for everyone that I'd like to share. That each year our staff, things happen, changes, staff come and go in a variety of ways, and but a significant one that affects our department and you should know about is that contrary to my wishes, Jane is chosen to return to a school. Jane's decided to finish her career back where she started in a school. So
can I see a show of hands, all of those
Hey,
opposed?
did you ask permission?
yeah.
Those lucky
So
kids. Which school?
we don't know yet. We'll see. Yeah. So So we will give Jane her accolades before the end of the year here, but I wanted you to hear from me that we have Jane's back. Probably this is her 6th year in student services, so I don't know if you're the longest serving assistant principal. I think so. So she's I think Jane's done her turn, and as you would all know, done fantastic work. So yeah. So we'll give her a send off towards the end of the year, but know that the rumor mill flies, and so at some point you'd say, hey, how come there's a job posting out there for Jane's job? And that's why. So we have turnover and change in our system administrator roles every year, basically, because there's a number of them, and people doing different things, and just happens to be Jane this time. So, but we'll keep you abreast of that change as things move along. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, I guess congratulations are in order then, Jane, since you got what you wanted, I guess. Anyway, yeah, thanks a lot, and we'll certainly do a more proper send-off at some point in the future.